At the point when the agents to the 1787 Constitutional Convention contemplated the topic of what age a president ought to be, the huge concern wasn't about the workplace holder being excessively old, however excessively young. George Mason was the chief backer for age necessities for elective administrative office, and his perspectives were recorded into the Constitution. Over the protests of James Wilson, clarifies John Seary, the George Irving Thompson Memorial Professor of Government and Professor of Politics at Pomona College, and writer of the book Too Young to Run. As opposed to putting forth a positive defense for the predominant shrewdness and development of seniors, Mason disparaged the inadequacy of youthful lawmakers whose political conclusions at 21 years old would be too unrefined and wrong to justify an effect on open measures. To certain eyewitnesses, the absence of an age limit for the country's most noteworthy office increases the danger of getting a president who isn't up to the afflictions of the activity. I'm worried about age-related dementia, which the activity can quicken given the weight of the workplace, clarifies Gary J. Schmidt, an occupant researcher in key examinations at the American Enterprise Institute. But on the other hand, I'm worried about the higher level of the opportunity of death while in office, which means we will decide in favor of one up-and-comer, however getting another person who we have not screened as genuinely. Ronald Reagan. Conceived February 6, 1911, the country's 40th president was 77 years and 349 days old toward the fulfillment of his second term in January 1989. While battling in 1980, Reagan attempted to settle inquiries regarding his age by swearing that he would leave if the White House doctor at any point identified indications of mental weakening. Once in office, Reagan ended up being strikingly versatile, and endured a death endeavor in 1981, just as medical procedure in 1985 to expel a carcinogenic polyp in his digestive organ. Reagan consistently appeared the image of powerful well-being, to some degree since he practiced routinely with loads and delighted in horseback riding and performing physical work at his farm in California. Reagan had the option to ignore worries about age with humor, when kidding during a 1984 discussion that, "I won't abuse, for political purposes, my rival's childhood and freshness." Donald Trump. Conceived June 14, 1946, Trump previously was 70 when he won an irritated triumph in the Electoral College over Hillary Clinton. By January 2021, the 45th president will be 74 years and 200 days old. Trump, who allegedly stays away from practice other than golf since he thinks it is undesirable and dozes only 4 or 5 hours per night, as of late gloated in a meeting about his capacity to review an arrangement of 5 words on a test intended to spot psychological decrease. Dwight Eisenhower. Conceived October 14, 1890, the 34th president was 70 years and 98 days old when he went out in January 1961. The World War II saint was a customary exerciser who possibly gauged 7 pounds more than when he moved on from West Point, as indicated by biographer Gene Edward Smith. By the by, he almost didn't make it out of his first term. In 1955, while on a getaway in Denver, Eisenhower stirred with chest torments. At first, his primary care physician didn't understand the reality of his condition, and hours went before a cardiovascular authority was called from a close-by military emergency clinic to give him an electrocardiogram, which uncovered that the then 64-year-old president had endured a huge coronary failure. Eisenhower needed to go through about a month and a half recouping in the medical clinic, yet regardless of his evil well-being, his ubiquity was incredible to such an extent that he effectively won reappointment the accompanying fall. Andrew Jackson. Conceived March 15, 1767, the 7th president was 69 years and 354 days when he finished his second term in March 1837. Despite the fact that Old Hickory had gained notoriety for being a tough ex-warrior and outdoorsman, when he arrived at the White House, he previously had gone through years adapting to an assortment of afflictions. As indicated by biographer H. W. Brands, tests of his hair uncover that he had lead harming from old projectile injuries. Jackson additionally battled with incessant looseness of the bowels from ailments he'd contracted while battling the Indians during the 1810s. His propensities for smoking and biting tobacco didn't help his well-being either, and as indicated by biographer Sean Wilentz, Jackson turned out to be so debilitated on occasion during his 2 terms that it showed up he probably won't endure. Jackson made it to the furthest limit of his term yet when come back to the Hermitage, his manor in Tennessee, the white-haired ex-president was genuinely spent and experienced blinding migraines, a sleeping disorder, serious agonies in his side and a constant hack. James Buchanan. Conceived April 23, 1791, the 15th president was 69 years and 315 days old when his single term in office finished in March 1861. Buchanan was 50 pounds overweight and his hair previously had turned white when he got down to business in 1857, yet his well-being disintegrated considerably more quickly under the strain of the activity, as indicated by biographer Jean H. Cook. Buchanan experienced difficulty recalling orders he had given, and he turned out to be so truly and intellectually depleted that he couldn't get up certain days, and made his counsels go to his upstairs library at the White House to meet with him. He likewise experienced hand quakes. Given the well-being challenges that he battled with, it's likely to be expected that he fizzled in his single term to mend the break between the slave and free expresses that prompted the Civil War. Harry S. Truman. Conceived May 8, 1884, the 33rd president was 68 years and 257 days old when he left office in January 1953. Truman, who climbed to the administration when Franklin D. Roosevelt kicked the bucket in 1945, was a constant exerciser, who even in his 60s strolled 1.5 miles every day at the equivalent overwhelming 120 stages for each moment pace that he'd utilized while walking in the U.S. Armed Force. He was fit as a fiddle. William Seal, an antiquarian and diary editorial manager with the White House Historical Association, told CNN in 2016. However, the strain of driving the country through the fierce Korean War, and Truman's propensity for working 18-hour days and overlooking diseases, nearly got to him. In the mid-year of 1952, he turned out to be wiped out to the point that he must be hospitalized, and specialists found that he was experiencing at the same time 3 diverse bacterial contaminations. As an article from the National Archives site noticed, the earnestness of his sickness was kept from general society. George H. W. Bush. Conceived June 12, 1924, the 41st president had arrived at 68 years and 222 days in age when he left office in January 1993. After a long profession in government that incorporated a stretch as Central Intelligence Agency executive and 8 years as VP, Bush had a great deal of mileage on his tires the time he arrived at the Oval Office. Yet, a lifetime of activity had kept the previous Yale University baseball star surprisingly fit for a man in his 60s. Hedge was a normal sprinter who oftentimes welcomed columnists along on his runs, previous White House journalist Kevin Merida later reviewed in a piece for sports site The Undefeated. Hedge had a few lurches that some deciphered as indications of being drained and withdrawn, remembering a second for which he checked his watch during a 1992 discussion and afterward experienced issues responding to a crowd of people-parts inquiry regarding how the downturn had influenced him. Despite the fact that he lost the political decision, students of history have come to value his accomplishments as president, including his treatment of the finish of the Cold War. It's a typical conviction that the pressure of being president will in general quicken an individual's maturing. In any case, a recent report by S. J. Olshansky, an educator in the School of Public Health at the University of Illinois at Chicago, found that U.S. presidents, at any rate the ones who weren't executed by professional killers, really would in general live longer than other American guys who were their peers. If you liked the video, do not forget to subscribe and like. Thanks for watching.